I'll tell you when to put a slide on, not right now. Okay? So the invocation to the Six Goswamis. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipuna Saddharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Saranya Karo Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nande Namataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalako. And the translation, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Shri Rupa Goswami, Shri Sanatan Goswami, Shri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Shri Raghunath Das Goswami, Shri Jiva Goswami, and Shri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Then, Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam. And the translation, when will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? So yesterday we beginning officially today, but just to recap, is that the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is basically the instructions of Lord Chaitanya to Srila Rupa Goswami. And he has formed the book called the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which has been translated by Srila Prabhupada as the Nectar of Instruction. And at times in the purport, Srila Prabhupada has quoted commentaries of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which is known as the Anuvriti. So that's where we are there from yesterday. And we're going to continue now, and we're going to get to the preface. So if you have your books, you can go to page V11 or whatever the page number is on your book. And I'm going to read the entire preface, and then we can move forward with the discussion thereafter. So in the preface, Srila Prabhupada says, the Krishna consciousness movement is conducted under the supervision of Sri Rupa Goswami. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas or Bengali Vaishnavas are mostly followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of whom the six Goswamis of Vrindavan are direct disciples. Therefore, Srila Narottam Das Thakur has sung, Rupa Raghunatha Pade Aihibe Akuti Kabe Hama Bujhaba Se Yugala Piriti. Quote, when I am eager to understand the literature given by the Goswamis, then I shall be able to understand the transcendental loving affairs of Radha and Krishna. Unquote. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in order to bestow upon human society the benediction of the science of Krishna. The most exalted of all the activities of Lord Krishna are his pastimes of conjugal love with the gopis. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in the mood of Srimati Radharani, the best of the gopis. Therefore, to understand the mission of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and follow in his footsteps, one must very seriously follow in the footsteps of the six Goswamis: Sri Rupa, Sanatan, Bhatta Raghunath, Sri Jiva, Gopala Bhatta, and Dasa Raghunath. Sri Rupa Goswami was the leader of all the Goswamis, and to guide our activities, he gave us this Upadeshamrita, the nectar of instruction, to follow. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left behind him the 8 verses known as Shikshastaka, Rupa Goswami gave us Upadeshamrita so that we may become pure Vaishnavas. In all spiritual affairs, one's first duty is to control his mind and senses. Unless one controls his mind and senses, one cannot make any advancement in spiritual life. Everyone within this material world is engrossed in the modes of passion and ignorance. One must promote himself to the platform of goodness, sattva good, by following the instructions of Rupa Goswami. And then everything concerning how to make further progress will be revealed. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. A follower of the Krishna consciousness movement should become a perfect Goswami. Vaishnavas are generally known as Goswamis. In Vrindavan, this is the title by which the director of each temple is known. One who wants to become a perfect devotee of Krishna must become a Goswami. Go means the senses, and Swami means the master. Unless one controls his senses and mind, one cannot become a Goswami. To achieve the highest success in life by becoming a Goswami and then a pure devotee of the Lord, one must follow the instructions known as Upadeshamrita, which have been given by Srila Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami has given many other books, such as Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Vidagdha Madhava, and Lalita Madhava. But Upadeshamrita constitutes the first instructions for neophyte devotees. One should follow these instructions very strictly. Then it will be easier to make one's life successful. Hare Krishna. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, September 20th, 1975, Vishwarup Mahotsava, Krishna Balaram Mandir, Raman Reddy, Vrindavan, India. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we'll discuss several points from the preface itself. The first line, it talks about the word supervision. And I'll just read the first line. Krishna consciousness movement is conducted under the supervision of Srila Rupa Goswami. So, Srila Prabhupada, in his humility, which is always there in his heart, he attributes the, you could say, supervision of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness to Srila Rupa Goswami, although he is the founder Acharya. So you can see his deep humility of how he gives credit to the entire disciplic succession, up to the Six Goswamis and then to the Panchatattva, in that sense. So this word supervision indicates that Srila Rupa Goswami is actually our authority, who has been, you could say, personally trained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Although Srila Rupa Goswami did not really need any training or much training in that way. So if Srila Rupa Goswami is our authority in basis of the Krishna consciousness movement, so that means Srila Rupa Goswami is watching us and is also guiding us in ISKCON. And at the same time, we could say in another way that we should be also, watching Srila Rupa Goswami and also taking guidance from Srila Rupa Goswami as a reciprocation for him being the supervisor, of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And then in this particular paragraph 1, it continues that we are called Gaudiya Vaishnavas, which indicates that we are simply followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Goswamis, and the rest of the disciplic succession that comes to us. So the word Gaudiya indicates a particular type of a devotee or Vaishnava. And that particular type of devotee or Vaishnava that's called a Gaudiya Vaishnava is actually the followers, are actually the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when one follows Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then it's not just a general Vaishnava, like from following, you could say, other sampradayas and so forth like that. But as particularly when we follow Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are Gaudiyas in that way. So therefore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he has called his mats, the Gaudiya mat, were followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically. Now, someone who specifically follows Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is specifically coming to that understanding on the basis of to understand the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, specifically the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, not in relation to, you could say, Vishnu or Narayan, or even the incarnations of the Lord. We're talking about Lord Ramachandra, Nishinga, Varaha, Vamana, and so forth. But the highest feature of Gaudiya Vaishnavas in relation to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is to actually understand the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, which is actually the ultimate and final goal of our you could say, following sadhana bhakti within the process of Krishna consciousness. So safely we can conclude that the goal of Krishna consciousness is to develop love for Radha and Krishna, technically called, in Sanskrit terms, Krishna Prema, is to develop our love, Krishna Prema, for Radha and Krishna. Now, in paragraph 3, towards the end in the book, in the preface rather, it says that one must promote himself in the platform of goodness, Sattva Gun, by following the instructions of Srila Rupa Goswami, and then everything concerning how to make further progress will be revealed. So here, In other words, everything, how to make further progress, these actual words are there, will be revealed. So the word reveal indicates a revealing, and the words reveal also indicates, can you could say from a verb to a noun, can come to the word revelation. Revelation. So Srila Prabhupada indicates in also other places and in one lecture also that, Krishna consciousness can actually descend into one's heart and one's consciousness by its own mercy. That means revelation can enter into you, provided there are certain instructions to follow of the disciplic succession, which is actually the whole book, the Nectar of Instruction of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Yeah. So therefore, how is this revelation coming about? So there is an adhikar, and the adhikar is that unless one has the strength or the potency to control one's mind and senses, one cannot make any advancement in spiritual life. That's what is exactly said in the preface also. So what does this actually mean on a practical level? It means that one should actually come to the mode of goodness, sattva guna, which is also said, by following these instructions of Srila Rupa Goswami. Now, in order to sort of control the mind and senses, now that is not easy for anybody. That is not easy for anybody. But it says in order to come to that point, one has to come to practically a Goswami consciousness. So Go means senses, and Swami means one who can control one's mind and senses. But that can be in any ashram. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sannyasi. One can be a brahmachari, grihastha, vanapras, or sannyasi. It doesn't matter what the ashram is. So it indicates on a practical level, not on the basis of one's dress, even as a sannyasi or as a brahmachari. It indicates that Goswami means that one who can control one's mind and senses. So when you look at that very carefully, that it indicates that why should one control one's mind and senses? Because the mind and senses will always give agitation, to do something unfavorable in one's actions that are not good for progressing in Krishna consciousness. So when it indicates that one must control one's mind and senses, it indicates that the mind and senses will give agitation. But one should have the potency or the strength by the process of Krishna consciousness or engaging in devotional service to say no to the agitation of the mind and senses. That includes also sannyasis. To say no. So that potency we need. So that potency that we need is that we should gradually become free from the modes of passion and ignorance and at least situate ourselves in the mode of goodness. So within the mode of goodness, one will actually have the potency to say no to the agitation of the mind and senses. But there's also Sudha Sattva, which we will discuss shortly in relation to text number 1, of what that indicates. That means the transcendental mode, the Vasudev state, which is above the mode of goodness or pure goodness in that sense, Sudha Sattva. So therefore, when one comes to the point of the mode of goodness and one is able to say no to sinful activities or material sense gratification, then that is the kind of, you could say, a disposition in one's consciousness, or the basis of which everything will automatically enter into one's heart and consciousness by its own revelation in Krishna consciousness. And that's a wonderful thing, that everything will be revealed by the You could say, in one sense, also by the intuition of the super soul, which is actually our own intuition by taking instructions from Krishna and following the instructions of the disciplic succession. So I just thought to discuss these three most important points in relation to the preface. So we'll leave some, you could say, time for questions in relation to the preface, and then we can move forward to text number one. But let's take your questions right now in relation to the preface. But if you also ask a question that maybe you could say answered by discussing the forthcoming text from 1 to 11, I'll mention it to you that, can you wait for the answer until we discuss a particular text, because it will be covered in that text as an answer to your question if you ask now. But still, we can take any questions for now, particularly if you can connect to the preface, or otherwise, if you want to feel free to do so. Anyone? You can actually raise your hand if you have a question, so that Krishna Prema Pradayaka can unmute you and you can come on, or you can unmute yourself. Or maybe it's too early for asking questions for now. But that's how I do it, because, if I need to
Maharaj,
discuss it.
There's a question by a devotee. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
There's a question.
Okay, Mataji, Hare Krishna Mataji.
Sita Thakurani, tell me your question.
Yeah, the last but one sentence speaks. Updeshamrita constitutes the first instruction for neophyte devotees.
Yes.
So, I thought NOI is for very advanced devotees, and now here it is saying it is instruction for the neophyte devotees.
Well, Srila Prabhupada says Upadeshamrita constitutes the first instructions for neophyte devotees. That's the end of the preface. Yes, that is right. That, one should consider oneself neophyte. That means neophyte is not a bad word. Neophyte means the beginning stages of practicing Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada and Srila Rupa Goswami will take us through from text 1, and then one will formatively, in the formative stages, come to the actual understanding up to text 11. So what does it actually mean that Upadeshamrita, or this nectar of instruction, constitutes the first instructions for neophyte devotees? That's your actual question, right? What it actually means is that anyone who's beginning Krishna consciousness must thoroughly study this book. Must thoroughly study this book. Anyone who's beginning to practice Krishna consciousness. In fact, in the beginning stages of Krishna consciousness, even prior to being initiated, if somebody can actually attend classes and study this book in the association of the devotees who can teach the book, they will actually get an idea of what it actually means to enter into the practices of Krishna consciousness properly. Properly means that sometimes devotees come to Krishna consciousness, but they may not know how to act. They may not know how to behave. They may not know how to even ask, proper questions. So that's what it indicates, that any devotee who's beginning to practice Krishna consciousness should study this entire book. But it's not that, text 9, 10, and 11 is for neophytes. It means that one should read this book, study it, absorb it. That's what it means. Okay? Next question, anyone?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, there's a question by Neela Chala Prabhu. So we have written the question in the chat, the group chat. So his question is...
Okay, let me read. Okay.
Hare
Is it on the screen, the question? I don't see it now.
Yes, Maharaj. Yes.
Okay, you tell us the question, and your voice is super clear today. I'm glad.
Thank you,
Thank
Maharaj.
you.
No
So
problem,
read
Maharaj.
the question for us.
So the question by Nila Chandra Prabhu, Hare Krishna Maharaj, can you please shine some light on the word attitude of the follower in the preface?
Yes. So I'm going to read that a little bit now, and then we'll take it from there. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. Okay. So this indicates that um, Srila Rupa Goswami does not feel himself very great in also giving us Srila Upadesamrita, because he is actually running, he feels, on the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So for Srila Prabhupada to write this, that advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower, it indicates that Srila Prabhupada himself is also very humble, supremely humble naturally, not knowing that he is humble. And therefore, he immediately says at the beginning of the preface that the Krishna consciousness movement is conducted under the supervision of Srila Rupa Goswami, not really him as the founder acharya. See? So therefore, Srila Prabhupada's humility is that he's placing himself, within the mercy, of the disciplic succession, which includes Srila Rupa Goswami. See? And Srila Rupa Goswami is placing himself under the mercy and merciful instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that mood of Srila Rupa Goswami is also within the heart of Srila Prabhupada. That is not taking this translation of Upadeshamrita into the English words, the nectar of instruction, but he is humbly presenting it. So that's the attitude of the follower in Krishna consciousness. So even for us, when we enter into understanding this book, like in the beginning stages, I said, Om Jnana Timirandasya after reading that. So we also humbly are composed of the mercy of the disciplic succession, which includes, one's instructing gurus and one's initiating guru as well as Srila Prabhupada, in our current status. So based on that attitude, I'm also trying to, be with you in your nice association, and to actually discuss, the Upadeshamrita or the nectar of instruction. But the actual verse that governs that attitude is Trinadapi Sunechena Tarorapi Sahisnuna Amanena Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. That, even while presenting this, myself, by the mercy of the disciplic succession, which includes Srila Prabhupada, who has translated this book, we also, feel that we are not qualified to actually enter into this book. So because we have to also tolerate our own mind and senses, especially, Pinadapi Sunechena Taror Api Sahisnuna, and request tolerance to enter, our consciousness, so that we can humbly offer respects to all those who are also here, within this Zoom course in terms of nectar instruction. So therefore, that attitude is very, very important for us all, which is the actually heart of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Rupa Goswami, on the basis of this verse, offering all respects to others. And why we do that is because we can clear our consciousness to humbly also continue to chant the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In other words, Kirtaniya Sadahari. All right. Next question on the preface. We're not going to rush it. We're going to take it nicely through.
Yeah, Nilachala Prabhu have actually continued that he said in the group chat that I have done some deity worship but found that my attitude was not very favorable in discharging my duties, and I would like to fix that flaw in myself.
Okay, it's a separate connected question, but it's also connected to some extent with the attitude of the follower. Okay, so Nilachal Prabhu, it is important that in the Nectar of Devotion, when Srila Prabhupada discusses, worshipping the deity, like that which we did in our devotion series, he actually emphasizes the deity of the chanting of the holy name. So whatever we do in Krishna consciousness, whether it's uh, addressing the deities, or cooking for the deities, or even sweeping the temple room, for that matter, unless it's an emergency and not a regular day, one should try one's best to actually chant 116 rounds of japa first, because the incarnation of the deity form in this age of Kali is Kali Kala, Nama Rupa, Krishna avatar. Krishna is descended in this Kali Yuga in the form of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So therefore, it is imperative that we try on a normal, regular day, except for emergencies or when we are sick, when the body is not well, that we chant our japa first before we also go on to engaging in deity worship. That is important. It may be impractical for that, from Monday to Friday when you have a regular job, but at least you can do that on the weekends to regularize yourself or regulate oneself, especially taking chant of the holy names before doing any of these services, which will govern our consciousness of engaging in deity worship or engaging in cooking or engaging to even one's duties as a father, mother, husband, wife, son, or daughter. If one actually chants first one's japa, that will infuse us of the proper attitude and mood of humility in engaging in other services, other practical services. Is that all right?
Maharaj, there's a devotee named Geeta Gupta, so the devotee have a question.
Is he available on the screen? It helps me to see the person in the mood when they ask the questions. Geeta, what's the devotee's name?
Geeta Gupta.
Geeta Gupta.
Because they've raised a hand. Okay, the devotee is sorry by mistake. I think they don't have a question. Okay.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Maharaj, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Is there a question from Geeta Gupta, Prabhu?
No, Maharaj. It's this.
Or is just a sway of the hand like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, anyone else with questions for the preface? It's a nice, everything is running smoother now, technically today. Anyone else?
So far, no one, Maharaj. That's all for now.
Okay, good. So everyone can repeat after me. You don't have to unmute yourself. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so now we're entering into text number 1. So if you have your book, would help. And the text is as follows, which I'll just read. And if you want to read with me, it will help. Because if you read after me, I may not be able to hear you. Okay, so text 1.
Maharaj, shall I put it like on database or something so that everyone can see on the screen? Just a suggestion.
When you switch like that, sometimes it goes a little bit funny. So it's better to just have their books. Everyone should have their book.
Okay, Maharaj. Yes, Maharaj, sure.
We are dealing with a book, and keep the book in front of you.
Okay, Maharaj.
Otherwise, we'll all be like connected to, just like social media. The book is Granthi. Granthi means that which is stitched. Book is Granthi, that which is stitched. It's nice to hold a book. Okay. So text number 1, you can say it with me. Vacho vegam manasa krodha vegam jiva vegam udara pasta vegam Etan vegam yo vishaheta dira sarvam apimam pritivim sasisyat. And Srila Prabhupada's translation. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Now, can you put slide 11 onto the screen from the PowerPoint if you can? Even if it comes smaller, there's no problem. Slide 11. Yes, wonderful. Keep it like that. Okay. So there's a similar text in Bhagavad Gita, which is now on your screen. It's quite the same verse, but some words are adjusted, but the meaning is the same. So it's a beautiful verse from the translation to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text number 3. And I'm reading it for you now. Before giving up this present body, if one is unable to tolerate the urges of the material senses, no, if one is able, sorry. Yes, I'm going to read this again. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, and you'll find it quite similar to the verse of Srila Rupa Goswami. If one wants to make steady progress on the path of self-realization, he must try to control the forces of the material senses. They are the forces of talk, vacha, forces of anger, krodha, forces of the mind, manasa, forces of the stomach, forces of the genitals, and the forces of the tongue. Vacha vega, manasa, krodha vega, jiva, which means tongue, udara, stomach, upastha means genitals. I'm continuing to read. One who is able to control the forces of all these different senses and the mind is called Goswami or Swami. Such Goswamis live strictly controlled lives and forego altogether the forces of the senses. Material desires, when unsatiated, generate anger, and thus the mind, eyes, and chest become agitated. Therefore, one must practice to control them before one gives up this material body. One who can do this is understood to be self-realized and is thus happy in the state of self-realization. It is the duty of the transcendentalist to try strenuously to control desire and anger. Now, keep this text onto the screen. You will find in the translation itself, it says, before giving up this present body. That means even up to the time of death. Even up to the time of death. So you can put me back onto the screen. So that indicates that the agitation of the mind and senses will be there even until the time of death. That's the nature of this material body that we wear as a dress and to misidentify in the bodily conception of life. So in other words, before giving up this present body, it's directly in the verse itself, and also in the translation Prabhupada mentions it, that the agitation of the mind and senses, we cannot say, one cannot say that I am free from the agitation of the mind and senses. One cannot say that. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada gave a nice example. Srila Prabhupada quoted one king, and his prime minister, told the king that the agitation of the mind and senses will always be there, even up to the time of death and leaving this body. So the king said, that cannot be. I know of great sages and saints that can control their mind and senses. Let's see what happens. So then there was the eldest citizen of the country for the king, and he was, literally over 100 years of age. So the prime minister took the advantage at that time, and he took the king to visit the eldest citizen of the state, who was well over 100 years old, and he was lying in his deathbed, about to leave his body, soon, maybe in a couple of days. So then the prime minister told the king, that you bring your youngest daughter with you also, who was, by material bodily conception standards, she was most beautiful as a princess. So when they came to the home of that senior most citizen in terms of age, the prime minister told the king, look, when you enter the room to give your audience to your senior most citizen who is about to leave in a few days, you must watch the movement of his eyes. See? So when the king entered with the prime minister and his youngest princess child, who was of marriageable age, again, immediately when they entered, the king noticed that the eyes of this old man, over 100 years old, was only looking at the beautiful face of the princess. He just followed her with his eyes. And then later on, when they finished the visit with the senior most citizen by age, the king then understood, yes, that the agitation of the mind and senses will follow you right to your last breath. It's like that. But still now, one will ask the question, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this? And that is being dealt with very nicely in this text number 1, as we move forward to discuss further. Text number 1. So now we go to slide number 12, which is the next slide. Next slide, go down. Yes. Now, while you look at the slide, I'm looking at a paragraph 9 because I cannot give you the page number. It isn't paragraph 9. You can look at the screen. I'm making it easy for you. You don't have to look at the book. You just look at the screen, and you'll find it in paragraph 9, because the page numbers may vary according to the printing of different times of the same book. So here we are saying that this is Srila Prabhupada's suggested translation to text number 1. In other words, in text number 1, the actual translation, it says, a sober person, Dhira Tatrasnamuyati, who's free from the bodily conception of life. In the actual translation, Rupa Goswami says, and Prabhupada translates, that a sober person who's free from the bodily conception of life, he can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals. And therefore, such a person can be qualified to make disciples all over the world because he's free from the bodily conception. Therefore, a sober person. That's the first words in the translation. But it does not mention in the translation itself, about Krishna consciousness. Because we can also say that, even non-devotees, like even demons, like even Hiranyakashipu, he controlled his mind and senses with so much tapasya and austerity. So how does this make this a little different from being in Krishna consciousness? See? So therefore, the primary process that we should follow is hearing and chanting and remembering Krishna. But incidentally, by the way, when you do that, Krishna controls our mind and senses. We don't have to have a separate effort. So therefore, Prabhupada's translation, which he suggests to this text number 1, and I'm reading it on the screen, when one is fully practiced in the methods of Krishna conscious control, not just one's own efforts in controlling one's mind and senses, he can become qualified to be a bona fide spiritual master. So we accept Prabhupada's actual translation where he says the methods of Krishna conscious control. So now we're going to discuss this briefly before we get into each fact of Vacha Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam, and so forth. We're going to discuss that briefly now. You can put me back onto the screen. I'll move a little bit because of my sciatic nerve in my lower back, so excuse me for that. Now, you don't have to refer, you can refer to the book as you want, but I'm reading now into the purport of the book itself like that. See? So in paragraphs 1 and 2 in the book, Srila Prabhupada gives various analogies in relation to atonement. So therefore, I would request everyone, before we continue tomorrow's sessions, if you read ahead, if we won't complete text 1 today, but if you read ahead, from tomorrow onwards, then you'll understand what I'm speaking about, because it's exactly there in the purport. So I don't want to have a reading session with you. I'm just paraphrasing certain parts of the purport for emphasis. That's about it. See? So in paragraph 1 and 2, Srila Prabhupada gives various analogies, quoting from the scripture about atonement. And the word atonement in Sanskrit is called prayaschita. See? And the first one that is given is about the thief and the police. See? So in other words, it simply says that sometimes a thief, he gets caught and then he's put in jail. But still, he goes back and steals. He goes back and steals. So in other words, he commits the theft as soon as he comes out of jail again. So if the punishment by sending him to jail is considered atonement, there's no benefit to such punishment. He doesn't change. So that's about the thief and the police. And then Parikshit Maharaj, when he questions Sukadeva Goswami, he gives an analogy, about the elephants bathing. That, the elephant, it takes a very nice bath in the river, but as soon as it comes out, it throws dirt all over its body. So what's the value of that kind of cleansing when you become dirty again immediately when you come out? See? And then Srila Prabhupada gives his own analogy about Christian confessions. Now, Christian confessions means that they confess their sinful activities, but they are not purified from the desire to sin again, and then the next day they go and sin again. So that type of atonement is actually useless. Prayaschita. And Srila Prabhupada also said, which I mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion classes, that every day, 1,000 prostitutes, they're going to take bath in the Ganga to become free from sinful reactions. But the next day, they still remain prostitutes. They don't become purified from such a kind of, you could say, work or vocation or act. See? So then again, the next day, the same prostitutes, they take bath again in the Ganga and pray to Ganga, please purify us. But, we know that they go back and do the same thing the following day. So there's actually such type of atonement or prayaschita is useless. See? Why? Because the example is given that's, you have like unwanted desires which are called weeds. Now that can be destroyed by fire, just like the weeds are destroyed by fire, in a field. But then after a few days or even a weeks, the weeds sprout up again because we haven't rooted out the weeds. See? So similarly, what is that process that roots out the weeds of sinful activities or sinful desires? That is actually real prayaschitta or atonement. See? So continuing in paragraph 2 of the purport, which you don't have to go to, but you can listen to what I have to say, is that a sinful activity, it cannot be counteracted by a pious activity by taking bath in the Ganga or by going to confessions like the Christians do, or going to jail like the thief is. It cannot be counteracted by being regulated in that way. See? But real prayaschitta, atonement, and not artificial prayaschitta or artificial atonement, is actually the awakening of our dormant Krishna consciousness. See? And therefore, Srila Prabhupada discusses this in the beginning of text number 3. So we can put slide 13, and I'll walk you through that. It's like a map, but you also have it in your notes, and it's all in the purport. See? So therefore, real atonement, now right at the bottom of that screen, you'll find we have discussed the analogies of the thief and the police in paragraph 1, the elephant's bath in paragraph 2, and the Christian confections in paragraph 3, which I just explained. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada says, which is in the purport, a sinful activity cannot be counteracted by any pious activity, by taking bath in the Ganga, or, like elephants took bath and they come back again, or the thief and the police by going to jail, you're not still reformed yet, or the Christian confections. But real atonement is the awakening of our dormant Krishna consciousness. And you can only awaken your dormant Krishna consciousness by exactly doing what we are doing right now. That it comes to real knowledge. And within real knowledge, there's a standard process. So if you're looking at the screen, on your left side, there's a particular type of standard process, which is called regulative principles of yoga. And it's mentioned in the purport, all of these things. One can perform some tapasya. Even Hiranyakashipu performed austerity, but he didn't invoke his Krishna consciousness. And even those who are Mayavadis and do not engage in devotional service, they are celibate, but they're not really devotees. And others can do mind and sense control very easily, even if you're born into like a very cultured family. You won't engage in breaking the 4 regulative principles automatically because of the culture of the family. Your mind and sense control is there. See? And then people renounce, like, people like Mahatma Gandhi, he is a renunciant. Like that. And people are honest and truthful also in the material world, and they are clean. And some people even perform yoga asanas to keep the mind, sound and healthy itself, like that. So therefore, these type of regulative principles of so-called yoga and tapasya and vairagya, and control of the senses and renunciation and good qualities like truthfulness and cleanliness is not really going to awaken our dormant Krishna consciousness in that sense, by itself. So therefore, the standard process for devotees, which is on the right side of the screen, is the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness. It means one engages in devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide guru, and one has to be methodically trained in Krishna consciousness in the association of devotees. And the first and foremost is to actually come to the point of following the regulative principles. Like that. So one simple example can be given of how to follow the regulative principles. Is this, in your beginning stages, the formative stages of Krishna consciousness, is that there may be some agitation of the mind and senses to break one of the principles. Like, for example, even another devotee may approach you for sense gratification, but you are already married. So you should have the potency to say, no, what is this? I have to follow the 4 regulative principles. See? It's simple as that. So Prabhupada says that we should follow the 4 regulative principles, and the strength to follow the 4 regulative principles, or the potency, comes from completing our japa first thing in the morning. It helps us to do that. I just gave you one example. See? So if you do your japa in the morning, and then you go around, and you walk on the street to distribute books, but then you see that shop that you used to go to and eat that nice sweet or some snack from, and your desire comes. Then you don't know, no, I cannot do that because that's not prasad, all those may be vegetarian. See? So you check yourself so you have the potency to actually control your mind and senses through the mercy of Radha and Krishna by chanting the holy names. So before I go into each, you could say, point of of the verse itself, like Vacho Vegam is the first one, I can take some questions now again. To where I have already covered paragraphs 1, 2, 3, in the purport itself, just to overview it. Others I'll be reading, which is not the best thing to discuss further. Okay. Any questions on what I've discussed thus far, especially in relation to artificial prayaschitta and real prayaschitta or atonement, and also in relation to artificial austerities and renunciation in relation to actual practice of Krishna consciousness, which is our standard process. Anyone?
There is a devotee named Ramananda Gaura. The Prabhu has a question.
Ramananda Gaura, if you can come onto the screen would be nice. You can unmute yourself and ask the question. It would be nice.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Come onto the
Hare
screen.
Krishna Maharaj. You able to hear me?
I can hear you, but I cannot see you. Okay,
Yes.
Ramananda Gaur Prabhu, the light is behind your face, but later on you can adjust that. Now you can ask your question. That's
Okay.
better. Yes. Tell us.
Maharaj,
Can you
talking
sit
about
sit a little up. You can see yourself on the screen, right?
Yes,
but sit a little up so I can see your chin also. Every expression of the face is important. Yeah, that's wonderful. Now tell me.
Talking about agitation of mind and senses, what will be the agitation of mind senses if one is in the mood of sattva guna? Is it like minimal, or is it like same those in the passion, or is it no agitation at all?
When one is in sattva gun, very practical question. Thank you. Yeah. When one is in sattva gun, that means the mode of goodness, one will not know that one is in the mode of goodness. That's the first thing. But one can easily identify if one is in the mode of passion or ignorance. See? So, if the mode of passion and ignorance is more prominent in one's consciousness, but if you do not move the agitation of the mind through the agitation of the senses into action, then unknowingly you are in the mode of goodness. Are we okay so far?
Maharaj.
Yes, so therefore it is important to know, to identify that one is in the mode of ignorance or mode of passion first. And that comes through the practice of Krishna consciousness and through transcendental knowledge, which we're actually discussing right now. And the practice of Krishna consciousness is also hearing, Shravana, which we're doing right now. See? And Kirtanam, speaking, because you're also asking a question, which is Kirtanam. So therefore, if you can identify that this thought of mine, which is agitating my senses, is actually the mode of ignorance or the mode of passion, then you can understand that I can use my potency to say no to these activities. Automatically that puts you in the mode of goodness. But if one is not in the mode of goodness, one cannot even identify that this is the mode of passion or ignorance. Am I making sense to you here?
Yes, Maharaj.
So I'll give you a practical example. Like the mode of ignorance may be something like, watching, going to the movie, watching a mundane movie where where, like, people break the four regulative principles in that movie. So if the desire for you to do that comes to you, you should immediately understand that you're in a mode of ignorance or passion. See? Because in the movie, there may be people drinking liquor. In the movie, there may be man and woman doing what they do. You understand? So therefore, when you have a desire to do something mundane like that, but you're not actually in, you're not actually in the act of the movie of drinking liquor, doing something else like that, but you're succumbing yourself to be in the mode of ignorance and in the mode of passion. But when you identify, no, I shouldn't be doing this. Let me watch a Prabhupada video, or let me, watch a lecture, or let me watch a devotional movie. Immediately, if you dovetail that kind of desire, then you're in the mode of goodness. But you may not know you're in the mode of goodness because you have the potency to not allow yourself to do something and associate with something in the mode of ignorance or passion. You may not know it. So you cannot say, I am in the mode of goodness. But what makes you in the mode of goodness unknowingly to you is that you can identify that this action that I'm about to do, I'm about to succumb myself, my mind and senses to, is in the mode of passion and ignorance. You can know that. You can know that. See? So I'll give you a kind of like Prabhupada, you could say, anecdote in relation to this. Okay. Of course, I'll spare the details of who it happened to, but just to respect devotees. Srila Prabhupada, was told by one disciple to him, and the disciple told Srila Prabhupada, sometimes I'm in Maya. And Srila Prabhupada said, don't talk nonsense. You're always in Maya. See? So what does this mean? It indicates that that when we sort of excuse me, let me just take some water. Sorry. Thank you. It indicates that, Prabhupada said that when this devotee said, Srila Prabhupada, sometimes I'm in Maya. And the Prabhupada said, don't talk nonsense. You're always in Maya. So it's a very instructive anecdote. It's short, but very sweet and very instructive. So this indicates that those who are non-devotees, who are innocent in their ignorance, they're not even in the mode of passion or goodness, because within ignorance, there's the mode of passion with non-devotees. Within ignorance, there's the mode of passion, because they don't know better. See? So the non-devotees, they do not know that they are under the control of the three modes of material nature. The non-devotees feel this is life. This is life, what I do, what's wrong with it? What's wrong if I drink liquor, smoke cigarettes, illicit activity? What if I eat meat? This is life, because they don't know better until they come to knowledge of Krishna consciousness and devotional service. So the non-devotees are in the innocence of their ignorance. In other words, they do not know that they're in Maya. But when you come to Krishna consciousness and you come to be situated in the mode of goodness, then you realize, oh, I am in Maya. See? I am in Maya. Through transcendental knowledge, through devotional service, and through association of devotees, I'm in Maya. So when you come to the point of recognizing that I'm in Maya, then you're in the mode of goodness. But if your mind and senses are agitating you, and although you recognize that this is like not right to do, but you give in to the mode of passion and ignorance, then you're not in the mode of goodness. Then you're guilty of knowledge. You're not innocence and ignorance as the non-devotees. So therefore, the difference between non-devotees and devotees is that the devotee was a non-devotee before, but when he came to the Krishna consciousness through like removing the darkness of his ignorance, Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guru Venama. By the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, was our Param Guru, our principal Shiksha Guru, through his books and so forth. So when we come to Krishna consciousness, then we realize, oh, that material life was really bad, Those activities I was doing was really bad. But still, you get the vestiges of those activities in your consciousness. And you feel, maybe I should go back to them. See? That means you're guilty in knowledge, not the innocent in ignorance as the non-devotees. So one has to check that. And if one can check that and have the potency of not going back to sinful activities, then one is situated in the mode of goodness naturally without one's knowing it. So it's not sufficient to follow the 4 regulative principles in Krishna consciousness. It's more than that. One has to actually realize that even my subtle desires, which are rooted and has to be uprooted, That is real prayaschitta, or atonement. But there's uprooting of the desires that comes to the agitation of the mind and the senses. Vacho vegam, manasa kroda vegam. This vegam, urges. When it comes like that, it does not come overnight to realize that. It takes some serious, and sincere engagement in the processes of Krishna consciousness. So it will take some time. And this chapter is also going to, at least this verse, text 1 in the purport, is going to help us to come to the conclusion of how actually it takes some time to come to the mode of goodness, and eventually Suddha Sattva, the transcendental mode, pure goodness, or the Vasudev state, which is going to be discussed in this text later on, possibly tomorrow, towards the end of this text.
Thank you very
Is
much.
that all right?
Yes, it's clear, clear, Maharaj. Maharaj, I have another, it's not a question, but a request that Maharaj mentioned regarding the notes. So how to obtain the notes?
Well, that you have to talk to Krishna Prema Pradayaka. I'm talking about the slide notes. If you didn't get it, write him an email.
Right.
And I don't want a question like that again, because every day people will ask for notes. You got it right?
Yes, Maharaj.
Krishna Prema Prabhu?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yes. Or write to the devotee who sent you the link.
Okay.
Mm.
Maharaj.
The link must have came through your phone or through your email, right?
Yes.
You'll get the slide notes, but the discussion notes is different. That's facilitated. I'm just giving you the slide notes, which is coming onto the screen. It's the same PowerPoint as slide notes.
All right.
All right. Any other questions on text number 1 in this introduction within text number 1?
Yeah, yes, Maharaj. There's a devotee have written the question in the group chat. So the question is, it's a long thing he have written here. So anyway, I'll read it out. Initially, in our start of Krishna conscious, we may be enthusiasm and things will go as mentioned. Example, we will be more Krishna conscious, but somehow aware when there is tend to become more mechanical, we lose the taste for reason we're not able to identify. Some event in my 1 minute. Let's scroll it down. Some event in your life may disturb our Krishna conscious. Things won't be the same, and reinstilling to ourselves in the same state is very difficult. So how to face this?
Okay. So in text number 3, which we'll come to in the next several days, it says Utsahan Nishchaya Daryat. Utsahan means enthusiasm. So this devotee beginning stages asks something about enthusiasm, which we'll discuss more in text number 3, and we will answer all of his questions in text number 3 when we come to that. Okay, so hopefully the devotee will be coming onto our Zoom calls when we come to text number 3. Another question?
It's a
Anyone?
question by Akansha Sharaf Prabhu. So you
Can you come onto the screen if you're on this?
Yes, Hare Krishna,
Okay,
Dandavat
smart.
Pranam Maharaj.
Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, Maharaj, I have unmuted. Can you
Okay.
hear
Come on.
me? Hare Krishna.
Now I can see you. Okay, tell us your question. Your name
Hare
is?
Krishna.
Your
Hare
name is?
Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Maharaj. Akanksha. I'm Akanksha.
Yes. Where you speaking from?
I am from Mumbai, Maharaj.
Okay. Tell me your question, Akanksha.
Maharaj, I have a question related to this text which is mentioned that even the yogis and even demons like Hiranyakashipu, and they were able to tolerate all the urges of the body and do severe austerities. Majorly, what is the difference between the process of surrender, which is like austerity, celibacy, or and the pure devotional service? The
Nice
major
question.
difference between the two.
Good question. Nice. Okay. Hiranyakashipu, as an example, he performed austerity and tapasya. But then he performed the austerity and tapasya to break all the regulative principles after that. So for example, people perform austerities and penances and renunciation for more sense gratification, not to control the mind and senses. So that's the difference between that type of artificial austerity or artificial renunciation and artificial penances. And also some people will even have knowledge for the sake of knowledge of being like a, you could say, Gyani or a Panditji or a Shastriji. That's all for sense gratification, to get followers, fame, name. In other words, to have material influence. In Krishna consciousness, we become free from that because by surrendering to Krishna, Krishna controls our mind and senses. There's a beautiful verse in the Narada Pancharatra, which is the Bhakti, which is the Bhakti Sutras by Narada Muni, and it's called a Paribhasa Sutra verse. Sarvapadi vinir muktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti uchite. So when we surrender to Krishna, when we engage in devotional service, when we associate with devotees, and when we chant the holy names and only honor Krishna prasadam, then Krishna controls our mind and senses. There's no separate effort for us to do that because we are situated safely at the shelter at the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. So that's the difference. In other words, we don't perform austerity to break the regulative principles like Hiranyakashipu did. We don't perform tapasya or renounce this world, but actually our greatest sense gratification when we renounce this world is to become God, like the Mayavadis and the impersonalists do. We don't do that. So therefore, we are always Jivara Swarabhai, Krishna and Nityadas, eternally servants of the servants of the servants of Radha and Krishna. Is that okay, Akanksha? Okay, thank you. And
Yes,
next
Maharaj.
question.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Next question.
And that's all for now, Maharaj.
Is that okay for now?
Yes, Maharaj, that's all for now.
All right. So now we're going to step by step within text number 1. And the first thing it says, Vachovegam. So Vachovegam indicates the urge to, you could say, speak or vibrate. The urge to speak or vibrate. Now, Jiva Vegam will come later on, tomorrow or the next day. It depends how we're going on with the classes. Yeah. So Jiva Vegam also means the tongue. That means to taste. But the first words of this verse is Vacho Vegam, which means to vibrate, sound. or to speak. So we find that, we find that Srila Prabhupada gives a very nice analogy of crows and swans. Now, the crow is a bird and the swan is also a bird. But they are not birds, so to speak, in consciousness and nature of the same feather, see? Because of the different mental attitudes. Now, the crows are compared to, you could say, fruitive workers or passionate people, whereas the swans are compared to, as an analogy, to devotees or saintly persons. See? And the crows, they take pleasure in places, you know where the crows are, like places where there's garbage, filthy places. You know? And Srila Prabhupada mentions what are filthy places. Where people take liquor, where people engage in illicit activity, meat eating and intoxication. Those are for crows. See? And the crows are also like passionate people who are fruitive workers. They take places where they go to where there's like liquor and women, or men for women, for gross sense pleasure. But the swans, on the other hand, they take pleasure in places, where you could say, in one sense, where everything is clean, everything is pure, in that sense. And they do not take pleasure where the crows are. They take pleasure, the swans, where there's nice scenic beauty, there's a transparent reservoirs of water. That's the swans. And there's nicely decorated, the water is decorated, with nice lotus flowers. And there's, colors of natural beauty, no artificial situation. So that is the difference between the two classes of these birds. And therefore, nature within the material world has influenced these different species of life with different mentalities. And it is really not possible to transform a crow into a swan. It's really not possible. The nature is so deep in that sense. So similarly, there are different types of literatures for different types of men and women, for different mentalities. And within the common market, when you go, you'll get literatures that are mostly attracting people to like the crow-like categories, in terms of sinful activity and sense gratification and so forth. So they are generally known as people who take pleasure in mundane talks, vachovegam, in mundane vibrations, which are in relation to the gross body and the subtle mind. They are full of subjects that they describe, sometimes in very decorative language, full of mundane similes and metaphorical arrangements and so forth. But with all that, they are still suffering and they are not happy. Crow-like consciousness. See? So therefore, Prabhupada says, this is simply like an external decoration of a dead body while living. In other words, they are not touching the very selves as the spirit. So it's just decorations of a moving dead body in that sense. See? So, whereas the swan-like men, swan-like women, they are called manasa. They always keep like a standard of natural, voluntary service to the Supreme Lord on the spiritual plane. And such literatures, like our Nectar of Instruction here today, like Srimad Bhagavatam, like the Bhagavad Gita, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, such literatures are transcendentally soothing. from the suffering of the material world. And they simply glorify the Lord, and they're enjoyed by, Prabhupada uses the word, like Hansa is a swan, and they're enjoyed by Paramahansas, swan-like devotees, who has actually grasped the essence of what a human being should do in this world. So let's put slide 14 onto the screen. Vacha Vegam. See? And we'll conclude today's session, if there's no more questions, with this slide. We're going to conclude it shortly. So let's take some, you could say, some questions now before we conclude with that slide in terms of Vacha Vegam.
Maharaj,
Oh, another thing,
Yes,
Srila
Maharaj.
Prabhupada gives the analogy, Srila Prabhupada gives the analogy of the croaking of frogs in paragraph 4. I'll just read it for you. I mean, it's quite amusing actually, in paragraph 4. Just give me a moment, I'll find it. I have it. I'll just read it for you. It's in paragraph 4. Prabhupada says, if we do not speak about Krishna consciousness, we'll speak about all sorts of nonsense. Prabhupada uses the word nonsense. A toad in a field speaks by croaking. And similarly, everyone who has a tongue wants to speak, even if at all he has to say is, he has to say is nonsense. The croaking of the toad, however, simply invites the snake. Please come here and eat me. Nevertheless, although it is inviting death, the toad goes on croaking. The talking of materialistic men and impersonalist Mayavadi philosophers may be compared to the croaking of frogs. They are always speaking nonsense, as thus inviting death to catch them. Controlling speech, however, does not mean self-imposed silence, the external process of mona, as Mayavadi philosophers think. Silence may appear helpful for some time, but ultimately it proves a failure. It proves a failure. Okay, let's take some questions and then we'll conclude with this final slide, which is from the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Any questions?
There's a question by Kwan Siu Kaur Prabhu.
Is he coming on the screen or?
Yes, he is coming on the screen.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Oh, it's Mataji.
Oh,
Okay.
Mataji, sorry.
Sorry.
You said
Okay.
Prabhu. I said Prabhu.
Yeah, okay.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. I just want to ask a very basic question. Now that we are
Can you
now
lift
that
it up? Yeah, it's better, but keep your.
okay, now that we are on text 1, and it says that a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demand, and the actions of anger. I'm just curious why this text gives so much emphasis on the actions of anger when it could be the actions of the sense of our pride, envy. Why so much emphasis is given on anger?
We're going to discuss actions of anger tomorrow.
Sure.
It's in the text. So we'll give you, and then if you're not satisfied with the discussion tomorrow, which is nice, not satisfied means more questions, and then until we're completely satisfied in Krishna consciousness.
All right.
So we'll discuss anger tomorrow, and then we'll talk about the pride and so forth that's connected to it, if we can. You can ask the question again tomorrow.
Right. Sure. Hare Krishna,
Okay.
Maharaj.
Thank you very much. So I want to conclude, you could say, start on time and end on time, so everyone's happy with that. So we have a few minutes, so we're going to end on time. So let's take the slide 14, which Prabhupada tells us how to overcome this mundane vibration and so forth. Slide 14. Vachovegam, urge to speak. The conclusion is that Only when we talk about devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead can we refrain from useless, nonsensical talk. We should always endeavor to use our speaking power solely for the purpose of realizing Krishna consciousness. All right, so we'll conclude with that for today, and I look forward to a nice association tomorrow. So you can see that we're not really rushing this. We're going to take it nicely through and through. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki,
Jai.
Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Nectar of Instruction ki,
Jai.
Sri Upadeshamrita ki,
Jai.
Nitai Go, Premanande, Hari Hari
Hari
Bo,
Bol. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.